All right, welcome back. It's Art with Anderson here. It's Joe, your host. Yeah, and Jim was saying this is day 13 in a row. So we haven't taken any days off yet. There might be some in the future. We'll talk a little bit more about what our plans are. But thanks for joining me today. Uh, the thing is, today I want to dive in, give you an opportunity to check out some of the work that I've done recently. As you can see, this drawing of a skull that I did, I actually did this with pencil and white charcoal. We'll be using this as a way to kind of map out some general proportions of the face. And I'll be starting off with my iPad just to show you guys some of those proportions, and then we'll switch to paper and you guys might be able to follow along. But I always find that it's good to start off with the general idea first. So again, thanks for sticking with me. We've had some steady growth over this past 2 weeks, and it's been crazy to see, especially people joining us day after day. So I always appreciate it. And the thing is, I want to make sure that I'm getting you guys content that you can use or at least find interesting. So if you feel like something's a little bit too advanced, don't be shy. Try it out. Even if it's, above your head at first, believe me, if you continue on your artistic journey, you might find opportunities like even a couple weeks to a year or two down the road to apply some of this knowledge. And so we're going to dive in without much further ado. So I have this side view of a skull here. Oops, let's see. And I've zoomed in. I do want to show you the whole piece. I did the front and side view of the skull. And it's part of some research I'm doing into medical illustration. And if you think of the skull as kind of a dark and spooky thing, it can be kind of weird to think about. But at the same time, it can teach us a lot about some places in the face that you can actually predict that are going to be pretty consistent across everybody's face. So just like anything else, when you're drawing a skull or learning proportions, they're just a guideline. Think of it as, it's not like a bullseye thing, but it's definitely going to get you to zoom into the right area, and it'll eliminate some stress of deciding, how far down is that nose compared to the eyes, or maybe it's an angle or something. We can help you with that. So what I'm going to do is go to my side view because we covered some of the proportions of the front of the face. But let's just use a tracing line to go over this thing and see if we can see some general shapes. That's been a theme of my broadcast here, is just to show you how we can break things down from general and then we move to more specific things. So you probably noticed this large oval here. Oh, let's see if I can get on the correct layer here. There's this major oval up here, and think of this as a little container for your brain, right? Now, I didn't complete that arch, but you can kind of see, if I were to complete this down to that brow ridge there, we have a pretty much oval or egg-like shape that kind of gets over here. But then typically, since we don't think of the head, especially from like a kindergartner's perspective, we think of the head as more of an egg shape overall. From the side view, we have this jawline. So you notice these angles. There's one at the back of the jaw here. There's another angle here at the bottom. Okay. It's called the maxilla if you're interested. And then we have this cute little angle here. And then I want to just draw your attention to the mouth over here. Let me zoom in a little bit. I generalized this shape with kind of a rounded parentheses shape, okay? Don't feel pressure to follow along here. I'm just looking for some general shapes here. All right, and then the line that we usually think of as the mouth is that between the lips or actually the teeth, right? So if you're smiling, you might notice, this is the line that you're going to see in between the teeth, okay? But think of your teeth as not just floating in your mouth. They're actually connected to, the skull on the upper part and then to the jaw on the bottom. So keep in mind that like that skull structure is going to affect the shape of the face, okay? Now the other thing you might notice is we're missing the nose, but there are some pretty prominent areas that are there. So I talked about that brow ridge, right? See this angle here that goes in? That's part of that point that protects your eye and your eyeball inside of the eye socket. Okay, and this top part is important. And then we see what we call the root of the nose. So this little angle right here, or that little point, That's called the root of the nose. So if you wear glasses, that's where the glass, the bridge of the glasses goes right into that little pocket. That's an important landmark on any face. So we'll be talking about that. But you'll notice that the nose is missing, and that's partially because our nose isn't just straight bone, right? So the bone of the skull, right, around the nose is actually it's partially there. The rest is soft tissue or cartilage that holds up the front part of the nose. You might notice we obviously can't see any lips, and that's a pretty important thing to add on a portrait. We'll talk about some general areas that might have, but I do want to point out one thing that, we are most comfortable. We look for things like eyes, right? Mouth, chin, nose. We're very comfortable with that. But a lot of artists can work for years and not really pay attention to what we call the zygomatic arch or the cheekbone. Okay, I want to show you this. Now, in this drawing, I was drawing from a real skull, and it was actually cracked right here. But that should be a solid bone. But notice that there's this shape right here. And we were talking about like the bony ridge that protects, if you were to get hit, right? Feel a bone right here in your cheek. That's actually an arch that goes all the way around, almost all the way to your ear. Now that's a really important area because it allows some muscles to pass through underneath there to pull this jaw. So that's why if you look in the mirror and you open and close your jaw, you can see like muscles attaching up here moving. It's because those muscles attach all the way down here to pull up this jaw to help you chew and talk. So the jawbone right here, right, this is all separate. And then I want to point out, too, we did mention in the first picture, right, if you look at, say, the front-facing skull, here's our oval, right, of the face. And about halfway down is where our eyes are. If we look over here, same thing. About halfway in between the top and bottom of this skull is where the eyes are and the ear. I want to point this out. So your ear, right, inside of this little hole is where the nerves go in, right, inside. That's like the actual ear canal. So that's almost about halfway down the head as well, but it's kind of at the end of this bone that turns out really shaping some of the features on the front of your face, right? So if you go down a little bit, you can feel that it's kind of soft. That's like your cheek soft tissue that is, just basically closing in your mouth. You wouldn't want that to be open. But it's really bizarre to even think about some of these features, all right? So we have some general shapes. Again, this top part, the cranium, right, where it's going to contain your brain. You can simplify that with an oval. And then we have this jaw. Now we've kind of jumped in a little bit deep, but I just want to see if you can think of like an example of seeing this stuff. I want to also point out right over here, right, this line is on the outside, like near your temple. This is kind of like soft. There's some muscles there. And then there's a bony ridge right here. That's something else that kind of forms the outside pocket of that, the eyebrow or the eye socket. There's kind of a passage behind, but there's this really cool shape that's going to help you, especially when you start shading, is this, what we call the temporal line. Okay, so there's this side of the face that is kind of just like straight up flat, and there's a big muscle group that attaches to connect to your jaw right up there in that flat area. But what you'll also see is a really cool way to do some shading. It's definitely like where the face turns from like the front of your forehead to the side of your head, especially in this upper part. So let's go into this a little bit easier if we were going to try to draw it from scratch. Say you didn't have this skull to look at. Let's just start thinking about some general proportions if you had to do it on your own. So I'm going to turn off all of these layers here. And I'm going to create a new one. All right. Well, why don't I do it on paper here so you guys are not stuck watching me on this computer. All right. So when I use the start, again, we practice that egg shape, but really important when you're doing this, remember to warm up. The warm up isn't really to loosen up your muscles so much as to get your mind in the idea of or in the mind of drawing loose and fast. So I'm drawing from my shoulder, and my elbow, and my hand is staying pretty still. I'm just going to practice doing a few ovals up here. Excuse me. Oh, and I noticed that Rick and Sue are late. I'll give you a pass this time. I understand. But next time it will be a detention. I'm just kidding. I was pretty lax with my students on the showing up late thing because as an artist, you know, we like to take our time. All right, so I got a couple ovals to warm up here. And I'm going to start off with one oval similar to what if I was just drawing the face from the front. Okay. Oval, egg shape, it's up to you. All right. Once you get a good shape on there, I want you to draw kind of a vertical line that goes down on one side like that. And then draw a line that goes straight across the top. This is going to kind of be a measurement for us. It should be about the same length, okay? And we want to cut it off just about there, but I want to draw another oval about the same size on its side right here. Now, if you want to turn your paper to make it easier for you, feel free. But you see how these two ovals kind of connect as an L? It's a really quick way to generalize the shape of the skull because we talked about that big area in back. We focus so much of our attention on the face, we forget that, you know, we have this brain container back here. That's quite a bit of mass that you're going to need to think about. So that is going to be the cranial mass there where the brain is, okay? This is what we call the plane of the face. All right, and before we get too into it, I'm just going to complete this little box here. Okay, and that's going to just help us locate some of the proportions on here. I want to split it into quarters here, so I'm going to split it in half and down here. And if you're thinking like, oh, I should probably use a ruler for this, you know what? Honestly, there's certain things, but like we talked about, this isn't laser accurate when we give general proportions. You have to adapt it to everyone's face, and we'll show an example of that later. Okay, so look, I got this divided up into kind of 4 quadrants, and let's just start to generalize some of those pictures as we go. Now, first off, I want you to take this halfway measurement and then stop about halfway in between and make a mark right there. Okay, and we're going to draw a line down to this corner. Okay. All right. And then I want you to find about where these two ovals interact, like right about here. And I want you to just go, if this is halfway, I want you to go even less than a quarter, just like a little smidge down here, and draw a line down here. And what we just created is that jawbone right here. Okay, can you see that L shape? You can feel it in the back of your jaw. That's kind of the angle, right? So if this is the top of your head, we have the jawbone. All right, now how about the chin? We're actually going to cut this off, put a little bit of a angle. I think I mentioned it in that first one. Just right at the bottom, cut it off. Okay, that's going to be that chin where it kind of goes upward. All right. Now, the other thing I want to point out is where is the nose and the mouth here? So we have this halfway marking. That's going to be really important. Okay, we're not going to draw the eyes just yet. It's important to get the nose structure, or what we call the root of the nose. I mentioned that before. All right, and the root of the nose is basically going to be right here, just slightly outside the plane of the face. So it just kind of comes out, and you can almost draw it as this is the top part. Okay. And then it's actually going to scoop inward down here and go to about a little bit above half. We're just going to scoop it out. So it looks like a fish hook like this. And you're going to see this little pointy part. Okay, that's going to be called the nasal spine. It's actually that bony piece that holds up, like that locates the base of their nose. Okay. And then a little bit below there, take a little bit of a space, and this is going to be where our mouth is. We're going to put a little bit of a parentheses right here because your teeth kind of go out and around. They're actually round. Think of like a tuna can. That's what your jaw looks like. If you cut a tuna can in half, it's that front curve, right? So we have the teeth that stick out, and then in between, I'm just going to put a little line. All right. And this follows some of those basic proportions we did. We're just drawing it from the side. It's just we're using it as an opportunity to look at where the bones present themselves, or what we call landmarks on a face. Okay. All right. Now, how about those eyes? Well, first off, if we split this one kind of in half, this side, right, into like quarters, okay, your eyes are even like right in the middle of this. But all I want you to do, I'm going to do it first over here. Another fish hook. Okay, it's just going to go out like this. Okay, we're going to start about here. We're just going to go up just a little bit above the nose and go down. That's the top part of that eye socket. And that's going to go a little bit below this line to about right here. So it's like a C shape. We're just drawing the bones right now. We're not really worried about like what's filling them in just yet. But it's something you want to be aware of, even this basic skeleton. All right. Now, how about that temporal line? That essentially starts right over here, and we have this big oval that goes back just about to that where that oval intersects. All right, that's the side of your skull. You can feel that where those muscles attach. And then from this line, or this little dot that we put before, we're going to draw out the zygomatic arch, or that cheekbone, right? This is the part that's got a little straight line on the top, and then it goes downward, flattens out, and then goes up to like the base of your eye, just like this. So it's almost like a trapezoid where one side is a little uneven. Again, if you're not spot on, don't worry about it. It's just something to look for when we're drawing a little bit more detail in the face. All right. And then if you're really interested, think of this as that joint, your jaw kind of comes up like this, scoops down. Your bottom teeth are located right here. And the top ones kind of come in over there. We're almost there, but I do want to just talk about one other oval that you're going to want to look for, because where does the spine or the neck connect with your head? Okay, that can be a little confusing. A lot of people think, oh, well, it's back here, but what's interesting is that where these two ovals came together, like here and here, that's typically what we call there's just this area that connects. I'm trying to remember what it's called actually. But there's a little arch here, and the skull goes a little bit lower right here because the spine connects right here in this kind of beautiful S curve and holds up that head. So it connects right underneath, because you can imagine if it connected down here, it would be very top heavy and it'd be always like pushing down quite a bit. This area is called the, what is it called? Mastoid process. I could be wrong. And then there's a little bit of you can actually feel this. It's called the Occipital Protuberance. It's like in the back of your head over here. There's this little bump in your bone there. But we've generally put this skull together. Okay, and you can kind of lightly erase some of those lines. Now, it might seem like a lot of information, but what did we just do? Compare it to what we were looking at before, right? The amount of detail that might be in a skull like this, right? We simplified it into probably under 10 landmarks. So instead of focusing on how all the light and the shading goes, we're focusing on just 10 key things to look for before we try to draw a face, okay? So let's get back to this and we'll clean it up just a little bit. All right, so when you have a skull drawn already, it can't like just jump directly into trying to find exactly what a person's going to look like if you were looking at a photo or a picture, but it can help us when we take our time to look exactly what makes that person's face unique. So I'm going to be pulling up a picture of a friend that I did a drawing of. I have the original photo, at least it's close to it. And we'll kind of try to overlay some of those same things so you can see it in a real picture of the face. All right. So I'm going to jump back on the iPad just so you can see it. And then we'll try to quickly sketch in her facial details over the top of this one in just a minute. Okay, so let's find this picture here. Okay. My friend Raph here was posing for another project of mine. I have a product called Sack Up Game. You can check it out, sackupgame.com. Anyway, this is the thing. This was from a photo shoot. She was nice to pose for me. And let's just see if we can trace some of those details over the top of this drawing. Or this photo, I should say. All right, so we started off by creating that oval at the top, right? If we had a line drawn across here, here's the plane of the face, kind of, right? Goes down her chin. And now here's the bottom. So we're making that square. Let's put that other oval in here, but we'll try to connect it. She has a slightly different shape, but we can modify it, right? Now, I should mention that the skull is a little bit shorter this way than it is tall, especially if you were to have like your jaw open. But we have our general shape. Let's split it in half. Okay, and then in half again. And we are pretty much spot on. You can notice that this line goes right through her eye, right? We have this, let's go for the jaw first. So about halfway down, we'll draw this line down to the corner. Looks like we got pretty close to that jawline. And then over here, her jawline kind of comes a little bit farther forward. It's not as dramatic and deep in the back, right? But we kind of captured that jawline. And notice, like right at the top there, that's where the ear canal goes. And let's try to find her cheekbone. Now, again, this can change in shape, and for a lot of people, or for everyone, it's unique. Oh yeah, the mastoid process. Again, forgive me. I'm still like, I don't really memorize all these vocab words, but I just find them interesting. You know, when I was a kid, someone made fun of me. They're like, "We don't want to hang out with you. You're obsessed with words." I'm like, "No, I'm not." And then I went home and looked up what obsessed meant. So that's the kind of kid I am. All right. So let's look at that zygomatic arch, or the cheekbone. Now, how do you find it on a face? Well, the thing is, I'm looking over here. I'm just going to draw it in. You see this shape? Okay, that is going to be that main bony part that's smoothed over by the cheek muscles, right? Cheek muscles and the soft tissue. But I want you to see there's like a little angle in here, and that's the front part of it. And then the eye socket is going to be right here. And we'll just go straight across and bring it back up. Now, the other crazy thing, though, is we can't really see too much of what we call the temporal line, but we'll draw it in anyway. This is the side of the head, and it comes back to around the ear. Let's look at the front of the face right here. So I'm going to go in. That's going to be where we call the root of the nose. It's just about halfway, right? And then we'll go out. I'm going to sketch her nose in here, and we'll kind of compare it. I'm going to go down, find her lips, and we'll continue out like this. All right, now let me turn off the photo. I'll turn off everything else. Okay, so we can find some of those general areas. For the mouth, we could have the curve of the teeth that's kind of hidden by the lips. And it goes right here. That's pretty much spot on, right? If you're confused about this part of the nose that scoops inward, what it means is that basically all of this stuff is soft tissue over here. So there's a lot of interesting things going on. But if we compare it to the skull that I had, this like little root of the nose has a totally different shape. It's higher up. So the thing is for different people, it changes the little angles, but our general proportions are still on. And we were able to find those things and just adjust the angles, right? So it's not a laser focused detail. It's just a general proportion that you can use to adapt, okay? So what are we going to try to do here? Well, I'm going to take out, first of all, I want to show you a picture that I drew of her using, this is a digital portrait, so this is an actual painting I used from the photo. But let's look at the shadow along her jawline. That kind of closely maps onto that angle of the jaw. And if you were looking, we can see, since we're shooting from upward here, you can kind of see more of the base. And we're just drawing in the side. So it might even be a little bit closer, but depending on what angle you take the pictures from, this might affect it as well. But at least we're looking for the right things. Now, how about that cheekbone? Because that's really the bonus I want to share with you guys today. I want you to look. There's usually, if there's light coming in, let's look at this really light area. The shape of this is following a lot of that cheekbone, right? Because it turns into the eye socket right here. That cheekbone kind of comes down, and this is kind of a hard bony ridge, but this is the area that's kind of a shadow, that's the soft tissue in the face. So that's where you're going to see a little bit darker change right there. Now, another thing I want to point out is if her teeth are kind of behind here, this is kind of a curved picture, right? This area right here where it meets, where this is where the cheekbone might meet the skull, right, is kind of curved. If you think of it like this, right, it's a curved part of the face. It's almost like, if you think of like an animal like a horse or something, it has like a snout. Think of this as our snout, right? It actually comes out and it has its own kind of cylindrical form. All right, and then that brow ridge, okay, the temporal line in this picture is hidden by this shadow. Do you see it? Right here, and it goes back into the head. So shadows are going to be the way that you find some of these things if you're looking at a photograph. And I use this is my painting, right? I laid down those shadows. That's what makes it look like her, right? So I know that this is pretty, intense stuff, but just like in the one where we were drawing JFK, you know how we were talking about just using the grid to find the shape of the shadows? That's also what I'm showing you here, is like, think of it as like looking at, if you were thinking of like, if you're a prisoner trying to escape from prison, and there's always that part of the movie where they put all the pillows in the bed to make it seem like there's somebody laying there, and there's like sheets over the top, and they maybe make like a fake little head with hair on it. That's essentially what the skull is like all those pillows, and there's these sheets of muscle and skin over the top, and you're trying to figure out like, oh, what's underneath there, because that's going to tell me about the structure of the face and help me shade it later. All right. The other thing too is we have like hair and stuff. We haven't really talked too much about that, but just keep in mind that it's not too much of a mystery. It adds a little bit of, onto that skull, but let's just try to pull back and let's use her photo to draw from. And we'll see if we can adapt this skull that I drew on paper to look a little bit more like her. All right, so I have this picture here. I'm going to leave it up. And just so you can see it, I might zoom out a little bit for you because I'm going to be doing it on paper as well. Okay. Let me see if I can start this drawing. So we have our base skull. Maybe I'll put this down so you can see a little better. All right. Now I'm just going to sketch in some of the other details. I have this laid in already, and I can always erase. So I'm using a pencil. I'm just going to mark, okay, her hair goes across about here, and it goes to her ear, which is about right here. Okay, her jawline kind of comes a little bit more narrow. And her nose starts a little lower, in my opinion. So it has a lower angle, and it's going to come out to here. It's going to meet up. It's got a round end to it. So I can erase some of this, but that just means that I at least start the nose in the right spot. Okay, and what I notice is she has this kind of like, I'll draw it here, but it's from the base of her nose, it kind of comes out like this. I notice that prominent chin. So remember, there's kind of a soft pad on the chin itself. You can bring that out a little bit. But I'm going to reduce how much her teeth pop out here. And because her mouth, like especially by her lips, are pretty subtle. Okay, and I will do this a little bit later to show you some of those things, but here's what I'm going to draw for the lip. Okay, now her eyes you can't really see too much, but that line that we drew before is more of the eye socket, so that area that is more it's like that bony ridge. It's a general area, but it's actually got some nice smooth curves in there. But what's unique about this picture is it has the shadow of these sunglasses, which I know, for example, there's a line that goes across here, and those sunglasses stick out right here. So if these are the sunglasses, goes kind of across a little bit above the eye. And for this, I'm just going to draw her eyelash because I can't really see too much of her eye, but it's going to be a triangle here. Let's get some more hair in there so we can get a general shape and start to feel like it's a person. Okay, so I noticed that down here, there's more of a line that goes in and adds the bulk of her hair. And over here, it shows her jacket. We got this hair up top. It doesn't add too much height, but it has a little bit of a shape to it in the front when it comes around. I'm not going to draw those wispy hairs just yet. We'll save that for the end. The hair kind of switches over that ear as it comes over. I will say that this picture was taken from a slightly, I'm slightly underneath her, so it's shooting upwards. Let's draw on the sideburn area right there. And it kind of corresponds with that cheekbone, right? Just above the cheekbone there and that temporal line. So that's going to be the shape of her hair. Okay, and let's kind of just look at her neck here because the hair stops right around where we would normally see the spine. And some of it's covered in shadow. So let's start by erasing some of the stuff just to clean it up. Okay, so I don't need to see this too much anymore. And again, for this purpose, like I want you to know that this is a pretty quick drawing. We're just trying to generalize this stuff, but with practice, you can apply this. It's really just like, you know how computers run a program in the background? You're not thinking about it 100% of the time. It's just running in the background and helping you make a decision when a problem comes up. That's essentially what this is really good for. So I'm erasing some of that proportion, but I can always kind of see a ghost of that image in here. Let's look in to see if we need to correct any of this stuff. So I've put in this nose. I think it sweeps even a little bit deeper. Okay. I don't want to start this too far up, so I'm going to put in the top lip here, bottom. It's a little rounder on the bottom lip. It comes out here. And then I got to continue a little lower beyond my jawbone because I can see a little bit here, and it sweeps over like that. I want to get the shape of that shadow really now. It cuts across the bottom of her chin. Her eyebrow is up here. It's a pretty prominent shape, but then I'm going to try to draw the shape of that shadow of the, what do you call them? Sunglasses. If you're sticking with me, I do appreciate this. This is getting a little bit heavy. I've kind of covered a lot of the basics here, but I'm hoping that by getting a little bit deeper into the weeds on some of these ideas, you'll be able to just apply it in your next attempt, even as a background program, just thinking. All right, so I'm going to shade in, but I want to teach you another hint here on the hair. Focus, look, if you squint your eyes and look at this bright area, if I were just to make a basic shape, it's kind of like a rectangle, a curved rectangle. So I'm going to draw this little shape right here. I'm going to save that, keep it white. But the rest of it, I'm just going to shade in real quick to be dark. That's going to be her hair. Now, if you're starting to think like, how is it that I draw so fast? Well, this is the thing. A better question would be like, why? Why do I draw so fast? The reason is because if you're practicing a drawing, you want to fail quickly and then adjust, right? You got to make a lot of bad drawings before you make good drawings, and every drawing has a good part in it. So as you get better, more of the parts are going to be good. And the faster you draw, the quicker you're going to find out if it's going to work or not. So I always try to just blast some things in and see how it works. All right, so I have my general shapes. I want to shade in the shadow underneath her chin and behind her ear, right? We're starting to see a more general shape of her face. But what I want to point out here is, like, if I just started drawing this with a single line, trying to imagine what it looked like, I would get lost. If without this thing, I had nothing to compare it to. So starting with a skull and those general proportions, here we are. Like, I think we've done this portion of the drawing for less than 10 minutes, and we're starting to see this head pop out, right? We're having some basic shading in there, and we're on our way. Okay, so here we go. Let's do some more hair shading just to get this side going. So next to this area, instead of keeping it a rectangle now, I'm going to just shade in the direction that the hair moves across slightly. So I'm putting some dark hairs in there. Okay, and I'm going to do it on the other side, giving it a little bit of wispy curves as I go. So I'm following the shape of her head. In an earlier video, I kind of talked about lines that kind of follow the shape of the form as like the yoga pants of lines, right? They really wrap around the form. That's exactly what we're doing, right? So I'm using the direction of the head, that round shape, and I'm giving this head some volume. So I'm giving it some rounded shape to it. And you'll get the illusion of these beautiful reflections that you see in her hair. We can even accentuate them later with an eraser. Now this darker area, I'm going to use a little bit darker pencil for this. I guess a 4B. Drawing from my elbow. Believe it or not, it's the guaranteed way to get straighter lines if you just hold it solid. Okay. So now I have the darker hair mass. You know, I can always change it up. Let's go back to the picture. All right. Now, if I zoom in behind her ear, this shape gets pretty dark back there. So I'm going to darken it up a little bit. And there's a shadow behind her ear that's not quite hair. So the hair is like right there. This is the shadow behind her ear. We didn't really draw in the shape of her ear yet. So remember, there's a hole where the actual ear canal goes into the skull. We got to look for that, but it's kind of like a flattened area here. Curves out. She's got these two earrings. Put those in. I think her chin got a little bit too thick, so I'm going to erase that. And so this is what I would call my adjustment phase. You know, I'm adjusting levels, adjusting proportions. I'm using my eraser to clean things up so I get a clear view. But as you can see, we've got a pretty generalized shape of her face, right? Let's darken in some of this area. Maybe her neck is a little bit too wide. You would be surprised, though, when people, like, a lot of times in beautiful pictures, a lot of times you'll notice that a lot of like fashion models have what they appear to be long, skinny necks. You'd be surprised with how wide they are. Some of that is done with actually like a lens that can distort. It brings the face a little bit farther forward, but the neck is seen as like this thin, delicate shape. But in reality, it's really important for holding up this big, heavy dome that you have on your head. So there's a lot of muscle, there's a lot of shape. It has to fit, your air and, food passageway and all those other things. So just keep in mind, if you feel like that neck is getting thick, it has to be, right? It has to hold up this big bowling ball, right? All right, so let's zoom back in. We're kind of running a little low on time. But one other thing I want to point out is we talked about that temporal line right here. Now in this view, there's not too much shadowing over there, but I want to point it out because there's this area where it shows like the turn of the face, right? The head, kind of the eyebrows here show the turn of the face. The turn, that corner there, is part of this transition from the front of the forehead to the side onto that temporal line, right? So about right in there, it starts to turn down. So even if you don't shade anything in there, where that little bump on the eyebrow goes, that's exactly at that line to where it starts to transition to that other part of the head. So it's kind of a fun trick. The eyes, we didn't really talk about it, but from the side, you can't really see it too well in this picture, but I want to point it out. If you're drawing an eye from the side, it's actually going to be a triangle with the eye sticking slightly down. And then I want you to put the iris in like this, and then a pupil down like this, resting just below. The eyelashes come over, and you can kind of see sometimes the folds in the eyes, and then it'll kind of come up to the brow line there. So when I draw in her eyelash, which you can kind of see, it actually comes out. Here's the nose line. The eyelash comes out even farther. And you can kind of see where her pupil is here. Just going to hint at it. There's probably another line in, but in the picture it's hard to see. But it's kind of hidden by that shadow. Okay, and then let's kind of look at her nose, see what we can do. Now her nose kind of looks... Here's our sunglasses. Her nose actually is almost even here. She's got a dainty nose, and so that fold is about right here. There's a little bit of a shadow that goes around, and her nostril is a shape that kind of opens up like this. It's like a teardrop on its side. And we'll give the nose a little bit more round shape before it leads in to the top lip. We drew the outline, but we didn't draw the actual top lip, which is really one of the only visible things. We'll shade that in slightly. Okay. So again, not like, I wouldn't call this my best work, but for a lesson purpose, I feel okay about it. It's just that in 15 minutes, it's impossible to get a perfect likeness if you're starting off with some of these more construction lines and stuff like that. So I want you guys to, again, if you're trying this, cut yourself some slack. What I look at drawing a portrait as is literally, it's one of the most difficult things you can try to do as an artist, okay? Because it requires you to pull on all of your knowledge areas: shading, drawing, making lines, measurement, seeing proportion, thinking about the angle. How does the light reflect off of the hair versus the skin? There's all sorts of things that you over a lifetime you'd hope to master. So again, if you try one of these and it doesn't look complete, that's okay. That's what it's there for. It's a structure. It's a way to practice and to compare things, so you're not starting off blind and guessing, like, why can't I figure out how this person's face looks different than somebody else's? Because we have a general idea. Our brain can really, really identify somebody. Even from a memory, we can recall people's faces. But if we had to draw it, it's almost impossible. So you're learning a new language, and you're trying to you can't just download it from your brain and your imagination. You have to look, and you have to use the world as a place to do your research. But unless you take notes and observe and then try to record them, it's going to be very difficult to make your masterpiece, or even just enjoy the process of looking and seeing and comparing each other's faces, so you can really try to get a likeness on paper or a canvas. So I will be finishing this on Instagram in a time lapse. It might take me a few hours to post it, but if you haven't already followed me on Instagram, it's art_with_Anderson. And it'd be great if you could follow me or share it with anyone else that hasn't been following, if they might like it. We're going to wrap up here, but again, I want to thank you so much for joining in. This is a little bit heady, no pun intended. But again, if you have ideas for upcoming lessons, please send them my way. We might change up the schedule to where I kind of reduce, because every single day for 2 weeks has been nuts. But I will be here tomorrow for a 14th episode for a kind of containment daily draw along series here. But again, I really appreciate the time you spent with me. And if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification button so you don't miss out on any good content coming forward. So it's been Art with Anderson. Thank you so much for coming out, and hope to see you guys on Instagram, and let me know if you have any ideas for next episode. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.